Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me back.
We're so excited to have you. We are joined today by Caity, the other Caity, again, Caity Waters.
The better Caity.
And Georgia
Hi.
as well. And we are talking about regulation today. More specifically, regulation in our therapy sessions for our kids or clients that we're working with, and why we think it's so important to prioritise that for our clients and their learning within therapy. So we're going to start by having a discussion about what we feel regulation encompasses and what do we think about as OTs. And I'm very well aware that we are speaking to other clinicians as well today. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we know as regulation as OTs and what that looks like for us when we're prioritising regulation in our therapy sessions in a clinic that is full of tools and items that we purchase specifically for this reason, but also then speaking to clinicians that perhaps might not have as much of an understanding of the importance of regulation on a child's learning, as well as clinicians that maybe are not sitting in a clinic full of items and activities, or that you might be on the road or working in natural environments as well. So when we think about regulation, what are we thinking about broadly? And I know it's a big topic. We don't have to go into the very nitty-gritties of it, but what do we think about, Caity?
I think we think about so much. So we're really thinking about, I guess, the whole child when we're thinking about regulation. So I'm really thinking about, well, what does my client need to sort of function at their best, basically. So I'm always thinking about that, and I think it's a really collaborative process. So it's about collaborating with the child to find out what works best for them, and also collaborating with the parent as well around what works best for their child too.
Yeah, and what they've seen to work in different environments for their child and that kind of thing. What about you, George? When you think about a child's regulation in your therapy room, what are you thinking about?
I guess there's a few domains that kind of contribute to whether or not someone's regulated. We talk a lot in OT about sensory regulation in particular, but emotional regulation is another really big one that we spend a lot of time talking about. But when I think about whether or not a child is regulated, the biggest thing that I like to say to parents and families is this child ready to learn? Like, are they ready to access the best parts of their brain in the most comfortable way? And that looks really different for lots of different people. But yeah.
What do we know about the brain in terms of why it needs to be regulated to learn?
Well, I guess it needs to be regulated to learn so that we can access our cognition. If we are dysregulated, we are spending all of our energy on the parts of our body that are requesting that regulation need. If I give the example of, it's a really easy image to pull up in your brain. If I give the example of a child who is kind of bouncing off the walls, they're moving a lot, they're seeking a lot of movement, their brain, it's going to be so hard for their brain to focus on the thing I'm drawing on the whiteboard if they're like, but my leg will not stop shaking and twitching. So we want to make sure that people have access to that sort of access to the part of their brain that they want to attend and focus. We can't focus on multiple things all at the same time. And we need to be able to direct our focus onto one thing.
Yeah, I often talk a lot to parents about upstairs and downstairs brain as well. So upstairs brain being the thinking part of the brain. So as you're saying, those higher sort of cognitive skills. And then the downstairs brain being more of that sort of emotional brain. And what we know about dysregulation is that when a child or, an adult is dysregulated, there's actually a disconnect between the upstairs and the downstairs brain. And when there is that disconnect, again, we're not able to function at our best. We're not able to do that sort of learning. And so regulation is really important so that those parts of the brain are talking to each other and so that the child is actually able to learn. And when you think about therapy sessions, we're covering lots of hard topics. We're covering lots of new concepts at times.
We're talking about things that are tricky for the child most of the time.
Yep, absolutely. So, I guess that's why it's so, so important. And I always make sure that I'm explaining that to a parent as well so that when, they see us playing a warm-up game or they see us doing body movement, they're actually understanding why we're doing those things.
It's intentional.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we're having fun at the same time, but we really deliberately think about what things are going to support the child, and we're really deliberate in choosing those things as well, and even ordering them throughout our sessions too.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That we might set up some kind of body warm-up at the start of our sessions, but that doesn't mean that that's going to get a child through the full therapy session necessarily in terms of what their body's needing on that day in that moment. I want to come back because I know that you mentioned upstairs, downstairs brain. And for those who haven't heard of that concept before, it was a concept developed by Dan Siegel, and he's done some fantastic work around what it means for our brain to be working as a whole, and that our brain can sometimes trick us into thinking we're in danger when we're not, and what that does for our ability to access our higher order thinking. And something I speak to parents a lot about is this idea that in our higher order thinking, that's where we also store like our emotional control. So unfortunately, the time that we need that skill is usually when that part of the brain is shut down. But that's why it's so important for us to have ourselves and our child in a regulated state when we're learning emotional control and learning strategies, so that it can actually be absorbed into the part of the brain that it lives in, so that we're not calling upon trying to learn new information when we might be dysregulated as well. So we see a lot of different kids in our clinic, lots of different ages. We're 0 to 18 as well. So when we're thinking about dysregulation and what it could look like in our clients, what do you see?
So many things. Like, obviously, so many different kids present so differently, and parents present differently too when they are regulated in sessions and otherwise. Like I was mentioning before, the really classic example is that kid who just is having a hard time keeping their body engaged and safe, and they're super high energy. I also have a few kids who I see that I can tell they're dysregulated because they're withdrawn, they're kind of yawning, they're flopping over their chair, they're really disengaged. And that would be just as dysregulated. It's just like a lower arousal state, I guess. And we also see those kids who their words get ahead of them and they are really high energy. And because the other thing that's important to understand with regulation is that it's not always just like I'm overexcited. It can be I'm nervous. It can be I'm really interested in something and my motivation is really fixated on this topic that is not the thing that you're telling me about. So there are so many different things that contribute to that, but there are quite a few different ways it can look. I think as well, some kids you'll ask them a question one week and they'll demonstrate a really strong understanding, and the next week their body, their physical outside presentation might look the same, but the coherence of their answer is quite significantly different. And that's where I think we want to consider whether or not a child is like masking in our sessions as well.
Yeah, and that's something we were talking about before in terms of depending on how well you know the client and how long you've been working with them and what their body clues are and that kind of thing. But for a lot of the time, if you're still getting to know a child, you don't know what their masking looks like as well.
Absolutely. I have a situation with a particular client who's relatively new, no sort of formal diagnoses, but the care team's definitely thinking there's some neurodivergence there, and masking's a huge component that I need to consider. So in our sessions, you know, the client appears really engaged and will engage in all of our different activities and things. But when I've had a recent parent session following one of those sessions with the child there, the parent actually told me that they had a really tricky time transitioning out of the session. And I wasn't aware of that. So, you know, they were in the car park for a really long time before they could go. And mum was saying that the child was actually really quite dysregulated. So I think what's really important for us to consider as clinicians is actually, holding the parent in that sort of expert position of they know their child best, and actually collaborating around, okay, well, what does it look like when your child's dysregulated? Can you tell me some of those signs that maybe you were noticing in the session that maybe I actually didn't notice in there? And also collaborating with them around, okay, well, what do you think maybe I can do differently? How can I support your child's regulation a little bit more in my sessions? What do you do? What ideas do you have? And I think parents really value that as well.
Particularly if, a lot of the time we're working towards goals. If we are working on regulation-based goals, that's not necessarily always the case in our therapy sessions, where a child might need regulation breaks and activities, but their goals might not be specifically around that. But we might be working towards a child's ability to actually request breaks and notice when they're needing these things. And if they're not quite there yet and you're still learning about their body clues and that kind of thing, it's really important to collaborate with the parent or caregiver and go, what do you know about your child's regulation already? So that I can really try and focus on that throughout the session and check in and that kind of thing.
Yeah, what are their triggers? That's another really good question to be asking as well. But I loved what you said there, Caity, in terms of we're wanting to support our clients or the kids in being able to request different breaks or say what they need in sessions too. So something that I do to support me in sort of collaborating with them is actually giving some observations. So, for example, saying, I'm noticing that your body is moving really fast right now, or I'm noticing that you are looking out the window a lot, or I'm noticing that you're saying I don't know a lot, or you don't seem like you're really interested in what we're talking about at the moment. Can you tell me a bit more about that? What do you think you might need to focus a little bit more here? Or is this not really landing for you? What do you need in this moment?
And when we are working with our kids, and there is not a one-size-fits-all blanket approach for our kids. And I know that we even in our therapy session note template, we kind of have a bit of a number one, update, number two, warm up to some degree, but that doesn't always work for every client. But as OTs in this clinic, at least, what does prioritizing regulation look like in our therapy sessions, regardless of if they have regulation-based goals? What do you guys usually do to support a child's regulation in therapy sessions, broadly speaking?
Well, lots of different things, but I think it's that constant sort of checking in. So in our therapy rooms, and Caity, I think you might have headed this, but we have visuals, so sort of like emotion check-in kind of systems, and I think they're really useful. So often, like in a lot of my sessions, I might start with a bit of a check-in there. Some of my kids are pretty used to that and will actually initiate that themselves. So I think that check-in, we also do, I guess, a parent or child update at the start. So that's a really good opportunity if, for example, let's say someone's not feeling, they're feeling a bit sick or whatever it might be. But I think that check-in at the start can be really useful in sort of understanding, well, where are you at right now as you're walking into our session? And hey, let's look at, okay, well, what might we need to do from the outset to support you in that moment?
We have quite a decent walk from the weight room to our therapy rooms
All the
as
way up the
well. It's
stairs.
up a level, and it's a decent walk. So I find sometimes that walk can really give me enough information to go, okay, I was going to chat to mum first, but maybe I need to actually just get you some activities to get your body in a bit more of a regulated
How many
state.
times did I have to say walking feet before you got to your room?
Yes, or they've run off and you're like, you don't even know what room we're going to because they're just speedy feet. So I think that for us, we're always kind of assessing that and going, all right, what's my plan today and what do I need from the child to see somewhat of a successful therapy session?
And I think in a similar vein, we have the concept we'd like to introduce to the child. We have whatever our learning activities kind of are and our focuses. What I think OTs in particular do really well to be really flexible with is having 5 different ways you could teach the same piece of information.
Yeah.
To give you an example, if I had the concept of communication styles and I was talking about that with a kid who I could see was just really high energy, having a really hard time focusing, I would pull out 3 hula hoops and we would jump between each hoop to talk about each of the 3 concepts we were discussing, where another person might be like, that's going to make me, that movement is going to dysregulate me. It will make me so heightened that I will not focus. And so we'll do a jumping game first and then we'll sit down and we'll talk together. And maybe sometimes I'll let the child do the drawing and I'll do the writing, or collaborating with them and being really flexible about what the activity looks like, but not being flexible with the content of the activity. Like that's what your goal is, but being really responsive day to day and child to child as well is really important.
Yes. And so I mentioned earlier that we are working in a clinic space where we have sufficient number of resources available to us. We've got a lot of gross motor activities in terms of different size peanut balls and
also a really defined
and
closed-in space too.
Yes,
like
we do.
Got a room.
Yeah, so we will often think about the child before they walk into the room and grab a couple of things to put into the room. Or when we walk up the stairs, we go, all right, let's go and choose a couple of things for your body warm-up. What do you think your body's needing today? And that kind of thing. And then we do also have additional things that we use throughout our sessions, like like different forms of seating. We've got wobble stools, we've got peanut balls, we've got, they can stand if they want. We can lay on the floor. We've got fidgets, we've got crash mats. Like we've got a lot there. And when I was thinking about this topic, I thought back to a number of conversations I've had with different types of clinicians over the years, where they might be, I had one client where speech had kind of said to me, like, I'm really struggling to support this child's attention because they are so auditory sensitive that they're struggling to sort of drown out the the air conditioning unit and the sounds from the other rooms and that kind of thing. Like, what can I do to support them to be regulated so that I can actually get them to engage in the activity? Or I've had other clinicians that are like, but I'm working in a school environment. Like, I can only work with what they've got, but I'm really struggling to get through more than 10 minutes of focus on an activity, and I feel like we're not really getting anywhere with their learning and that kind of thing. And I think that's where collaboration as a care team is really important, because in those situations I've been able to think about that child and go, this is what I know about that child. This is what I know about what you've got in your environment. How can we support you to prioritise regulation for that child as well? So if we were speaking to another clinician that perhaps was working in like a consulting room where they didn't really have much other than, a table, a chair and some pencils and that kind of thing, like what kinds of things would you suggest clinicians can do to support a child's regulation in those kinds of environments?
Yeah, really good question. I think you're talking about auditory processing and things, and I think thinking about things like headphones, noise cancelling, loops or earplugs can be really handy. And I guess for a child with, a low auditory sort of threshold, it's likely that maybe they have some of these items at home too, or at school. So collaborating with, the parent or teacher around, hey, can those things actually be brought to our sessions as well? I think considering movement as well is really important. So there's lots of, I guess, body weight sort of activities and exercises that someone can engage in if you don't have things like peanut balls. So things like, wall pushes, planks or
I love
wall
to do
sits.
like a good like hand push. Like I'll put my hands out and get the child to push against my hand and tell them like, I want you to push me to the other end of the room or that kind of thing. Like actually really getting their body to work hard in that moment.
Or to squeeze themselves. So really tight squeezes so they get that proprioception or deep pressure as well.
Yeah.
Something I think of as well is particularly if you're thinking about someone who's consulting maybe in a school setting and kids are told they sit at their desk at their chair in their classroom, and being really transparent with the child about it's okay if you want to sit on the floor, it's okay if you want to lie down.
Absolutely.
What is the function of the activity you're doing? I'm thinking of a particular client and she's working on a speech intensive at the minute. And so it's really important the style of teaching that this speech is doing is really important for the child to look directly at the speech's mouth and the speech to look directly at the child's mouth. So they need to have that really clear face-to-face connection. However, she's having a really hard time staying in her chair. And I said, does she have to stay in her chair? Could you guys sit next to each other on the crash mat and turn your bodies towards each other? Can you, and obviously in a room where we don't have something like that, how can we follow the child's lead?
Yes.
To
what do they need?
To see what their body looks like it's already doing. And if it needs to be replaced with something similar, that's okay. If we can allow them to do that because they're still engaging, allow them to sit a bit floppier, allow them to lie down or sit on the floor and follow their lead. I think it's really important. Kids do a really good job of telling us what they need to do as long as we give them the permission.
Absolutely.
So that can be being really clear with the kid is important.
And that understanding, I guess, that learning looks different for everyone. So being engaged does not have to be sitting with cross legs or whatever it is. I know I've got a family, and if someone were to walk into that session and not have any background, they'd be like, what is going on here? Mum's often lying, with her legs against the wall upside down. Child is often, moving around the room as we go. And we get some amazing engagement doing those things. And I think if we were, sitting cross-legged, sitting at a desk, we wouldn't achieve what we achieve in sessions.
Yeah. We've got a little bit of an open space outside our clinic rooms, but even just kicking a ball back and forth for some kids or
walking and talking.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you do have the capacity to go for a walk, we've definitely had some clients where they've found sitting in a clinic or being in a clinic difficult, but just going for a walk around the local streets with their clinician, bearing in mind all your risk management and all of that needs to, that has been when they've had their best therapy sessions and they've felt calm and regulated and able to engage. But I agree, Caity, like I've definitely had sessions where the kids just been, we've got one room here where we have monkey bars and like the kids just been upside down on the monkey bars the whole time, but it's been like that's what they needed to have a really good therapy session and soak in that information. So I think for us, we're just about to transition to 50-minute therapy sessions, but I know typically some clinicians are doing hour sessions. They might not even have, a 15-20-minute window where they're chatting with the caregiver. It might be a 60-minute window just with the child, and that's a long time for a child to soak in new important information. So we would really encourage you to have a look at your environment and think about what is possible in that environment, and also think about your own regulation needs. Like, what are you doing in that 60 minutes that you're this is helping me stay alert? I know that by my 6th session on a day, I'm like, oof, like I need to have like my drink bottle there constantly kind of sucking at the straw because I am exhausted at that time and my focus is significantly less than my 10:30.
I did a session on telehealth yesterday or the day before, and it was a 90-minute appointment and I had a student observing me. So there's 2 of us in a little room and the heater was blasting and I was sitting there like,
cozy.
This does not match my needs. And every time a kid came upstairs and they'd come into another room, they'd say, oh, it's really hot in here. I'm like, take your jumper off. It's okay. Like, make yourself comfortable here because we will get snoozy.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've had I know I had one client that her school requires like winter uniform with like skirt and tights, and she was like, I'm hot, like I need to take my tights off. And I'm like, girl, if you need to do that to be able to participate today, go for it. Like, I'm not going to stop you. So
and I think we've spoken a lot in terms of sensory processing around like auditory and movement needs, but there's also a lot of other things that we can consider too. So I know in our rooms we've got I guess fluorescent sort of lighting. So for a lot of my clients I'll actually say like, would you like the lights on or off? So giving clients options and choices. Another thing is when I've collaborated with parents and the clients, they've said being able to eat a crunchy snack or something can be really regulating, or chewing on chewing gum. So actually giving clients those options too, and having, if they need a snack, having a snack there
and setting it up early. Like, I give you permission to do this if this is what you need. And obviously, again, with our snacks, we have to be mindful of what foods are coming into the clinic and that kind of thing. But I mean, even if we think about that parent that you were speaking about, that she's obviously seen this space as like, this is a really inclusive learning space. And for me to stay present for my child, this works for me as well. So we as clinicians have to sometimes be really black and white about like, I give you permission to learn how you need to learn here, because otherwise it's like if you environmentally just look at the room, there's a table and 2 chairs set up, and a lot of people expect that that's where they need to go. Whereas a lot of my teenagers just come in and straight away flop down onto the crash mat. I'm like, if that's where you need to be. I've got one client at the moment that for her to participate in therapy sessions, and I see her at my first session in the morning, she's bringing her whole makeup bag. She's a year 9 client, and she's bringing her whole makeup bag. She's doing like her whole makeup routine there, and she's like, this is how I stay regulated and like present for this session. I'm like, you know what? I'm enjoying watching it. So,
it's the doing, isn't it? So she's doing something whilst engaging.
And she's so fully engaged in those conversations. It's not like I'm like, hey, like bring your attention back to me for a second.
I think that raises a really good point when you think about fatigue and regulation as well. So if your client was to get up half an hour, 45 minutes earlier to do makeup before she came into your session,
it probably
she'd
wouldn't
be pretty
be
fatigued. This is a conversation we have often about what time of day really suits
your child.
The child versus parents' schedules and things like that as well. I've got some families who come to it really late in the afternoon, evening, like a 5:30 appointment, and our earliest one is soon to be 7:30 in the morning. And sometimes it does not match the child's needs, or we need to spend more time supporting regulation before we expect learning out of that child.
And likewise, I've got quite a number of clients over the years where if they are taking Ritalin, they're taking Ritalin and it's getting them through the school day typically. But then, perhaps they are coming to a 5:30 appointment and they are
all gone.
Yes, it's all gone. And it's funny, like I've had clients where they'll come in randomly on the holidays at like a 10 a.m. session. I'm like, whoa, this child is completely different today. So I think, really working with the family, if you are sitting there as the clinician going, I understand that they perhaps need this time or day for whatever reason, scheduling wise, but if it is not benefiting the child's outcomes because they cannot participate for whatever reason at that time of day, whether it be regulation from medication perspective or fatigue or that kind of thing, have those conversations with the parent or caregiver.
Also even telehealth and in-clinic or in-person telehealth. As well. That can be just as hard for some kids. I've got one that I see on telehealth quite early in the morning, and I appreciate the reason they changed that time was because of parent commitments to work. But we've had conversations about how do we make sure that this is still really benefiting the child and benefiting the parents too. Like, can you actually sit there and join in attentively, or is it not a good match? Do we need to make sure that you've gone and run around the block before you sit down at the computer and turn on for your session?
And the environment, usually they're surrounded by their toys and
their siblings.
Yes, their siblings and their dog and that kind of thing. So again, setting them up for success and going, what does a regulated body look like on telehealth as well for you?
I think as well, something to think about, particularly for those clients who maybe come in and are a little bit more withdrawn, actually using their interests as well. So rather than, getting into a therapy topic straight away, actually talking about something that they're really interested in and giving them space to share things that are really important to them. I think that goes a long way. And even I'm thinking about older clients too, but I have a client who often comes in quite withdrawn. So if I ask, a question about how netball was on the weekend, I get a one-worded response. And then we play a game of Uno and we spend, 10 minutes dedicated to that game of Uno. We have lots of jokes during it, a lot of banter, that sort of thing. And then after that, we are so much more regulated and ready to then engage in whatever we have planned for that session. It doesn't need to. We've spoken a lot about body movement. Sometimes it's not body movement.
It's actually connection. Sometimes.
Yeah.
And even I think we've talked about in the past as well, using AI to turn your learning task into something that is interest-based for them as well.
Because we can't be expected to know
every
everything
game on
about
Roblox because there's so many games on Roblox is what I'm learning.
Yes.
But if I type into ChatGPT, make these 3 characters from this game.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're interest-based, we're increasing their motivation, we're increasing like their dopamine, all those things that are going to help them.
Ability to attend, encode, all
exactly.
of that. So,
yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I'm going to put you on the spot. Key takeaways. What do we want people to think?
I think thinking about the environment, and I sound like such an OT here, but really thinking about the environment, what is going to set this child up for success. So to be able to do that, we need to know our clients. So obviously it's a little bit harder when they're newer to us, but really leaning on the family as well around what do they know sets their child up for success? And really collaborating with the child as well around, even the order of your session as well. I think those things are really important. Do you like to have a warm-up game at the start, or do you prefer it at the end?
Sure. Yeah.
What body movement works best for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think as much as we've been talking about regulation being really individualized from person to person, it's also individualized day to day within one person's capacity.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest takeaway is to be really flexible and really make sure that you have quite a comprehensive toolkit and you can be dynamic on the day in response to what that child's communicating to you that they need.
I was thinking that when you were speaking earlier around like if clinicians can kind of take one thing in terms of, you might think you have a really solid therapy plan, but we would probably encourage you to have a think about that learning concept or that thing that you want to teach. Like, how could you teach it in 5 different ways?
Exactly.
I think that will make you a flexible therapist in those moments and be able to bend to what the child needs. I'm going to say as well that like a very, just broadly speaking, a learning brain equals, or a regulated brain equals a learning brain as well. So if you're finding, and if you think back to kind of a couple of episodes ago, if you're finding that you're getting a bit stuck and you're like, oh, I've taught this same thing 5 times over and it's just not absorbing, have a think about what that means in terms of how can we really open up the child's brain for learning as well. Beautiful.
Cool.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
See you
you
soon, hopefully. We've got quite a few exciting topics coming up this term. So
looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks, Caity. Thanks, George.
Thank
we'll see you next
you.
time.
Caity.
Bye.
Bye.